Thanks so much, Avi. I'd just like to acknowledge Jay Sandak, who I had a great conversation with at dinner last night, and Professor Weiss and Colonel Miri Eisen, and my good friend John Gall, and Professor Avner Deshalit, and all the participants on my panel, my colleagues Michal and Lee, and all of you for being here. I'm from the United States. And it's always a pleasure to come to Israel. There's a lot of lively discussion, so we enjoy very, very much the spirit of the exchange. There's something very democratic about it. So, I'm afraid to tell you that this panel is probably not going to be quite as lively. We're going to talk about a specific policy idea. It was a great introduction, Avi, for what we'll talk about. So I'll just get right into it. I'm going to give an overview of the policy concept and why we care about it, and try to get, we have a very large experiment on this policy idea going on in the United States. Talk about that experiment a little bit. I might not get through all of these slides in my time, but the slides are here for anyone who might be interested. And then Lee will talk more about what's happening in a number of other countries, and then we'll come back around to what's happening in Israel. McCall will talk about the policy proposal here and what is in store for the future. Okay, so this is asset building as a policy innovation, universal child development accounts. This is a very simple categories, but I think it's important. There are different kinds of social policy. I think it matters that we talk about what kind of policy we're referring to, and that this is an ultra simple picture, but there are a set of universal allocations, social provision. This includes all kinds of public goods, the possibility of demogrants, payments to all people. We may get a version of discussion of demogrants here later today. There's a set of defined benefit income supports. Usually these take the form of social insurance or means-tested benefits. These are very common in Israel, and we're all aware of them. And then there's a category that has really arisen in social policy in the last half of the 20th century and is growing rapidly in most countries, which is usually called defined benefit or defined contributions. That it is some savings and are being accumulated. In this lecture, this is referred to as asset building, but this is basically defined contribution policy. Mostly it's accumulated for the purposes of tax, for retirement, and in many countries for home ownership. And the reason this is a public policy is because there are often large subsidies through the tax system for these defined contribution systems. So that's just kind of the grounding here. So we're talking about defined contribution systems. Globally, this is emerging more as a social policy idea. In the United States, major asset-based policies support homeownership and retirement savings, as I said, but there are many others that are emerging all the time for college savings, for health savings. The new Trump administration is going to make a very strong push for health savings accounts. And other areas in the past few decades. Social policy based on asset holding is not just a U.S. idea, a USA idea, but it's happening in really almost all the countries that we work with. So why asset building? Perhaps it's an adaptation to a changing economy. I have the view that basically the welfare state social policy structure that we operate in is a 20th century creation designed for a system of industrial capitalism that by and large is fading away. I don't think that the kinds of social policies that we have are necessarily the kinds of policies that we will have by the end of the current century, and I think there'll be a period of policy transition trying to figure out what kind of social policies fit the kinds of economies that we have. I think the emergence of asset-based policy is not unrelated to that larger tension of changing technology and changing economies and changing labor markets in particular. And specifically, it looks like, at least in the current economies in most countries, there are a lot more jobs that aren't paying a sustainable family wage. So the growth of the working poor. I just came from a similar conference in South Korea a couple days ago with exactly the same topic, that a whole lot of people are working but not able to support a household. And this is happening more in the United States. It's happening more in Israel. And if that's the case, then I think we really need to revisit the basic assumptions of the welfare state policies that we have. So why asset building? We have a body of theoretical and empirical work that says that it's necessary to accumulate assets, and this is coming out of a bunch of fields, economics and sociology and some other fields. It's necessary to accumulate assets for investments in long-term development, for education, develop skills, own property, own enterprises, and this is true for all families, rich and poor alike. And another part of this theoretical perspective, and we have some evidence here in the study that I will show you, is that asset building creates the material conditions, but also a set of outlooks and behaviors that are different from income transfers that promote household stability and development. This part of asset building has not been a common discussion in basic economics, but the idea that owning something changes people's outlook is kind of deeply embedded in the social philosophy of certainly my country and probably most countries. It turns out this probably has some merit to it. Asset building, why asset building? There's increasing inequality in both income and assets, and I spoke about that already briefly. I might move through some of these slides pretty quickly. But asset building policy that we have is enormously regressive. This point is really an important one. In the United States, we spend over $500 billion a year with tax subsidies for various kinds of asset accumulation. This is a large public expenditure. I think the current federal well, I'll probably get that not quite right, so I won't say it, but it's a significant public expenditure. Over 90% of this goes to the households in the top 50% of the income distribution. So this is and most of that to the top 10%. So asset building tax expenditures are enormously regressive. It would be hard to overstate this point. So this is public policy that basically is transferring resources to the top earners and the top owners in society. This is, in my view, this is just bad public policy. Why would the state, why would a government increase inequality as part of its public policy? But this is the reality in the United States, and to some extent, I'm sure it's the reality in Israel. I just don't know the extent of that. Poor people don't have the same opportunities and subsidies for asset accumulation. We have always, I'm a social worker, I care about helping people, but the way we have always thought about helping poor people is give them enough money, enough consumption support so they get by for the next month. We have not very often thought about making investments in poor people so they can develop their lives and get to a different economic plateau where they have more control, more of the kinds of things that were talked about in the first session, where they have some control over their life and can make some choices and can reciprocate and live a life that they would feel would be more normal. So the question for this body of work is, if we have asset-based policy, why don't we have this for the whole population? It's a very simple question. So the vision for an inclusive asset-based policy is that it would be universal, everyone is in, it would be progressive, greater subsidies for the poor, and it would be lifelong with beginning as early as birth. So this is not, I guess I'd like to make the point, this is not so much a anti-poverty policy, or I'm not proposing really a poor people's policy. I think, and I'm going to go back to the earlier point, I think we already had this policy, we just don't include poor people. So it's a very kind of different way of thinking about what a public policy does that supports a poverty population. The design features, it should probably be for social development, for education, homes, enterprise, stability and security. It needs to be automatic and easily delivered. And the more I think about this, I mean, I think about really it's possible in the 20th century, especially with information technology, that a lot more social policy can become almost like a public good, especially anything related to finance. Finance can become like a public good in an information age. Then all of this, the way we think about the financial world will change dramatically. I think it's perfectly possible to think about delivering, a set of financial services, which includes building assets to everybody as easily as turning on water taps. And I know that sounds kind of far-fetched, but information technology will make a lot of things very different, and the whole area of financial services and financial products and delivery of finance from a government to individuals is going to change dramatically. I can come back to that point if we have time. I'm probably going to. Are you timing me over here? Oh, good. 5 minutes. You have to watch it, professors, 30 seconds. Okay, I'm going to use up my 5 minutes here. Okay, so child development accounts beginning to be a fully inclusive policy. This is an idea that I set out really 25 years ago, so we've been working on it for quite a while. I won't go. These are the concepts for that. There are examples in the world and we're going to hear from some of them today. Singapore has by far the most developed child asset building strategies. I think Lee will talk about that. There was a policy in the United Kingdom for 5 years under the Blair government that was giving every child an account from 2005 to 2010. That was set aside with the election in 2010. Korea has a number of examples of child development accounts. They're working on child development accounts for the whole bottom half of the income distribution and taking steps toward that slowly, but even in conservative governments, they've been making progress on that. We have child development accounts now in several U.S. states and cities. New York City announced last week that every child in New York will get an account. And as McCall will detail, there's plans to do child development accounts in Israel starting in 2017. A few comments on a large research project. We have Seed for Oklahoma Kids. It's an experiment in the United States. I don't have time to give you the background on the experiment. This is a large-scale policy test. It's automatic and progressive child development account. It's the first universal child development account model in the United States. It's a test in a full population. This is important. It's not a selected sample. This is a random selection of births in Oklahoma. And then assigned to treatment and control groups. The research design is to integrate it into an existing policy. We've learned a lot over the years about, getting a policy in place in the world. It's a lot easier to build on a policy that's already there and change it than start a whole new policy, which requires a whole lot more legislative effort. So we're working with the existing college savings plan structure that exists in every state in the United States, and just change that policy has basically served wealthier people, and we're changing it now to serve the whole population. So we're oversampling minority groups. We have random assignment. We got really good results from randomization. So it's a rigorous study design, testing. We're able to make causal inferences from the results. Causal inferences at least to the population of Oklahoma. But the population of Oklahoma has representation of key populations in the whole country, so we feel pretty good about that ability to generalize. The policy platform, I said, is the 529. These are some results from 2015. So in 2015, the percentage of treatment kids was almost 100% who still had the college savings plan. There was an opt-out project. One mother opted out for religious reasons. So out of 1,300 and some treatment families, we're missing only one family. In the controls had access to the state college savings plan as they always had. That's 3.3%. The average amount of assets in accounts in these accounts was $1,800 and some for the treatment group and $300 and some for the control group. We had substantial earnings in the 529 accounts for treatments. So about a third of oh my goodness, 1 minute. About a third of the total accumulation was earnings. So this speaks to the importance of having the investment, the long-term asset accumulation in an investment account. These are sort of half equities, half bonds, and even though this went through the recession, because this started in 2007, even though it went through the recession, these accounts now are, with the initial deposit of $1,000, are worth over $1,500. So there's an important principle of investments into risk and return investment vehicles. And Israel, I'm sure, will be having that discussion. So let me emphasize a few. I think I've emphasized all these things, but let me emphasize a few non-monetary outcomes. The impact, we have positive impacts from CDOK on mothers' depressive symptoms. So basically, I'll put this in colloquial terms, mothers have a little more positive outlook in the world. We have a positive impact on child social emotional development at age 4. Children in the treatment group have a little bit more positive social emotional development, equivalent to the effect size that we get from early Head Start, which is a preschool program in America. We also have results on higher expectations of mothers for their children's education. We have positive impact on less punitive parenting with the treatment group. So we have a set of results that are together a rather positive story. I don't want to exaggerate these effect sizes, but they're measurable, and they're about the same size as we get in other children's services programs. So quite interesting. So one more comment on a theoretical comment. There's a lot of assumptions that the effects of child development accounts are because people learn how to save. So this is that hypothetical model. This is not our hypothesis, but this is a common interpretation of what these accounts are doing, that if these kids save, then there will be these other positive non-material effects. But in fact, that this is what the empirical picture looks like for that theoretical statement, which is that the child development accounts do increase savings behaviors, but these savings behaviors are not in turn related to the non-material outcomes. In other words, whether families save or not, in addition to the initial deposit, is not causing these non-financial outcomes. So instead, the theoretical picture is that if child development accounts are introduced and every family has one, and a child starts life with a deposit, then that will increase savings behaviors by the parents. It will also increase non-financial outcomes. So I'll stop there. Thanks.